The transport ship slowly moved through space toward the massive station floating in the darkness. Katie Morgan pressed her face against the small window and watched the structure grow larger. The First Contact Academy was huge, bigger than any space station she had ever seen. Its metal surface gleamed under the light of 3 distant stars. Captain Lisa Morgan sat beside her daughter and checked her tablet one more time. The mission orders were clear. Earth was sending its first group of human students to the Galactic Educational Consortium. 4 teenagers would represent their entire species. The pressure was enormous. "Remember what we talked about," Captain Morgan said quietly. "You are not just students here. You are ambassadors for all of humanity." Katie nodded and looked at the other 3 humans on the transport. Jake Phillips was staring out another window with wide eyes. The farm boy from Montana had never been off Earth before this trip. His hand shook slightly as he gripped the armrests of his seat. Amy Carter sat across from them, reading a book about alien cultures. Her father worked as a deep space miner and had told her stories about the strange beings they sometimes encountered. She seemed more prepared than the others, but Katie could see worry in her dark eyes. Ben Sullivan was writing in a notebook, probably recording everything he saw. His parents were xenobiologists who studied alien life forms. He had grown up hearing about different species, but this would be his first time actually meeting them. The transport docked with a soft thump. Katie felt her stomach drop as the artificial gravity systems adjusted. Through the speakers, a voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange and mechanical. "Welcome to First Contact Academy, human students. Please remain seated while we complete atmospheric adjustments." The airlock opened with a hiss and a tall figure entered their compartment. Katie tried not to stare, but she had never seen anything like it before. The being stood almost 8 feet tall and had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in long, delicate fingers. Its head was elongated with large, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I am Headmaster Zethkari of the Veltar Collective," the being said. Its mouth barely moved, but the words came through clearly via a translation device around its neck. "You are the human specimen sent for educational integration." Katie noticed how he said specimens instead of students, but she kept quiet. Captain Morgan had warned them that many alien species saw humans as primitive and dangerous. "Please follow me to your assigned living quarters," Zethkari continued. "You will be housed in Section 7, which has been specially reinforced for your safety." They walked through corridors filled with the most amazing variety of life forms Katie had ever imagined. Floating jellyfish-like creatures drifted past, their translucent bodies pulsing with soft light. Small furry beings scurried along the walls on 6 legs, chattering in high-pitched voices. A group of what looked like walking crystals clicked and chimed as they moved together down a side hallway. But Katie noticed something else too. Every alien they passed stopped and stared at the humans. Some moved away quickly as if afraid. Others whispered to each other and pointed. A few made sounds that the translators could not convert to English. "Why do they all look scared?" Jake whispered. "Because you come from what we call a death world," Zethkari answered without turning around. "Your planet produces violent, unpredictable life forms. Most civilized species prefer to avoid contact with your kind." Amy looked angry at this comment, but Ben quickly grabbed her arm and shook his head. Starting a fight on their first day would prove the aliens right about human aggression. They reached Section 7, and Katie understood why it was called reinforced. Heavy metal doors sealed them off from the rest of the station. Warning signs in dozens of languages covered the walls. The living quarters looked more like prison cells than student dormitories. "Your classes begin tomorrow at 800 station time," Zethkari said. "You will attend lectures on galactic history, comparative species biology, and interstellar law. Meals will be delivered to your section. For the safety of other students, you are not permitted in the common dining areas." After the headmaster left, the 4 humans sat in the small common room and looked at each other. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They were not welcome here. They were exhibits in an alien zoo. "This is not what Earth Command told us to expect," Captain Morgan said into her communicator. She was speaking to her superiors back on Earth, trying to stay calm despite her anger. Katie walked to the reinforced window and looked out at the main corridor. Hundreds of alien students moved past, talking and laughing together. They looked happy and comfortable in their diverse community. None of them had to live behind locked doors or eat meals in isolation. "Maybe we should just go home," Jake said quietly. "We do not belong here." "No," Katie replied firmly. "We belong here as much as anyone else. We just have to prove it." That evening, as they ate their delivered meals, Ben read aloud from his research materials about the other species at the Academy. The Veltar were from a low-gravity garden world where violence was almost unknown. The Christines were silicon-based lifeforms who communicated through harmonic vibrations. The floating jellyfish creatures were the ethereals, who had evolved in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant. Most of them come from peaceful worlds, Ben explained. Places where predators do not exist, where the weather is always mild, where food is abundant. Earth is different. We had to fight to survive. Katie thought about this as she tried to sleep that night. Earth was a dangerous place compared to most alien homeworlds. Humans had evolved as hunters and survivors. They were physically strong, mentally tough, and capable of incredible violence when threatened. But they were also capable of great kindness, creativity, and love. The problem was that the aliens only saw the dangerous side. They had heard stories about human wars and violence, but they knew nothing about human art, music, or compassion. Katie realized that changing their minds would be the hardest thing she had ever done. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Katie made a promise to herself. She would show these aliens that humans were more than just violent savages from a death world. She would prove that they deserved to be part of the galactic community. She had no idea how hard that promise would be to keep. The morning assembly was held every week in the Academy's Great Hall, a massive chamber that could hold the entire student body of 800 beings. Representatives from each species would present cultural information or academic achievements to the gathered crowd. Katie and the other humans had never been invited to participate. Today felt different from the moment they entered the hall. Katie noticed how the alien students whispered and pointed more than usual. Some of them were holding recording devices as if they expected something interesting to happen. The 4 humans took their assigned seats in the back section, separated from the main student body by a clear barrier. Headmaster Zeth Kari began the assembly with his usual announcements about upcoming events and policy changes. Katie tried to pay attention, but she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her from across the hall. The weight of their stares made her skin crawl. "Today we have a special educational presentation," Zeth Kari announced. "Instructor Velmoth will demonstrate the behavioral patterns of Deathworld species using our human specimens." Katie's blood went cold. She looked at Jake, Amy, and Ben, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. They had not been told about any demonstration. This was another humiliation designed to break their spirit. "Would the human-designated Katie Morgan please come forward?" Velmoth called out, his forearms gesturing toward the main platform. Katie sat frozen in her seat. Every instinct told her not to go, that this was a trap designed to make her look foolish or dangerous. But refusing would be seen as defiance, which could get all 4 humans expelled from the program. "Go," Ben whispered urgently. "If you do not, they will use it as proof that humans cannot follow simple instructions." Katie stood slowly and walked down the aisle toward the platform. 800 alien beings watched her every move, some of them making recordings for later analysis. She felt like an animal being led to slaughter. Velmoth waited for her on the raised stage, his pale blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. His forearms moved constantly as he spoke, gesturing and pointing like a showman about to begin his act. "Observe this specimen carefully," he announced to the assembled crowd. "Notice the aggressive posture, the way it scans the environment for threats, the tension in its muscular structure. These are classic Deathworld adaptations designed for violence and survival." Katie stood perfectly still, trying not to give him anything to comment on. But even her stillness was turned against her. "See how it freezes when confronted by a superior being," Velmoth continued. "This is a predator assessing whether to fight or flee. Most civilized species would show submission or curiosity, but the human remains ready for combat." The crowd murmured appreciatively, as if watching an educational documentary about dangerous wildlife. Katie bit her tongue and endured the commentary, knowing that any reaction would be used as evidence of human aggression. Velmoth began circling around her like a scientist studying a laboratory animal. He pointed out her muscle definition, her bone structure, her reflexes when he made sudden movements. Everything about her was analyzed and explained in terms of violence and primitive behavior. "The human facial expressions are particularly interesting," he continued, moving closer to Katie. "They bare their teeth to show aggression, narrow their eyes to focus on targets. and clench their jaw muscles in preparation for biting attacks. Katie realized that he was describing her current expression of controlled anger as if it was purely animal behavior. To the watching aliens, she probably did look like a cornered predator ready to strike. Now I will demonstrate how easily these creatures can be controlled through displays of superior intelligence and authority, Velmoth announced, without warning. He grabbed Katie's arm with two of his 4 hands, his grip surprisingly strong for such a thin creature. Katie tried to pull away, but his hold tightened. "Notice how it attempts to flee when confronted with a more evolved being," he said to the crowd. "This is typical Deathworld cowardice disguised as caution." Katie felt humiliation burning in her chest. She was being treated like an animal in a zoo, grabbed and handled for the entertainment of alien students who already saw her as a savage monster. The crowd was eating it up, pointing and commenting on her reactions. "Sir, please let go of my arm," she said as calmly as she could manage. "Observe the threatening vocalizations," Velmoth laughed, translating her polite request into evidence of aggression. Even when completely outmatched, the human cannot help but issue challenges and warnings. His grip on her arm tightened further, hard enough to leave bruises. Katie could feel 800 pairs of alien eyes watching her, waiting to see if she would live up to their expectations of human violence. The human pain response is also quite primitive, Velmoth continued his lecture, deliberately increasing the pressure on her arm. They rely on simple fear and anger rather than the complex emotional matrices of more advanced species. Katie gritted her teeth and remained still. She would not give him the satisfaction of crying out or trying to break free. She would endure whatever humiliation he had planned and prove that humans were better than their reputation suggested. But Velmoth was not finished with his demonstration. "Finally, I will show you how Deathworld aggression can be easily neutralized by superior intellect and technique," he announced to the crowd. Without any warning, he struck Katie across the face with his free hand, the blow connecting solidly with her nose. The impact made a wet, crunching sound that echoed through the silent hall. Blood immediately began flowing from her nostrils, spattering drops on the platform floor. Katie's head snapped back from the force of the blow, but she made no sound. She did not cry out, did not fall down, did not even raise her hands to her injured face. She simply stood there with blood dripping from her broken nose, her eyes locked on Velmoth's face with an expression of perfect calm. The great hall fell into absolute silence. 800 alien students sat frozen, expecting the human to explode with the legendary violence of her species. Instead, they watched her stand perfectly still while blood ran down her chin and onto her clothes. "There," Velmoth said triumphantly, releasing her arm and stepping back. "You see how easily these creatures can be subdued when faced with civilized authority. They are no real threat to evolved beings who understand how to handle them properly." Katie remained motionless, her breathing slow and controlled. Blood continued to drip from her broken nose, but she made no move to wipe it away or tend to her injury. Her dark eyes never left Velmoth's face, and something in her expression made several alien students shift uncomfortably in their seats. 30 seconds passed in complete silence, then 30 more. The only sound in the vast hall was the soft dripping of human blood on the platform floor. Some of the alien students began to realize that something was very wrong with this picture, but they could not quite identify what it was. Katie Morgan stood perfectly still for exactly 1 minute after Velmoth struck her. Then, with movements too fast for most of the watching aliens to follow, she showed them what a threatened human actually looked like. The first week at First Contact Academy was harder than Katie had imagined. Every morning, the 4 human students walked through corridors filled with aliens who moved away from them like they carried some terrible disease. The whispers followed them everywhere, and the translation devices only made it worse by converting the alien comments into English. "Look how they bare their teeth when they try to appear friendly," one student said about Jake's nervous smile. "I heard they can break bones with their bare hands," another whispered about Amy. "My teacher says they come from a world where everything tries to kill everything else," a third added while staring at Ben. The classes were the worst part of each day. Katie sat in the back row of comparative species biology, taught by instructor Velmoth. The tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and 4 arms seemed to take special pleasure in making. The human students feel unwelcome. Today, we will discuss the evolutionary stages that separate civilized species from their primitive ancestors. Velmoth announced to the class of 60 mixed alien students. Some species, like the humans in our midst, have barely progressed beyond their animal instincts. Katie felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry would only prove his point about human aggression. She looked around the classroom and saw how the other students were watching her, waiting for her to explode with violent rage. Jake sat beside her, his hands clenched into fists under his desk. The farm boy was not used to being insulted and had to fight every instinct to defend himself. Amy had stopped taking notes entirely and just stared at the wall, while Ben frantically scribbled everything down as if documenting evidence of their treatment. The human species exhibits classic Deathworld characteristics, Velmoth continued, pointing one of his forearms at Katie. High muscle density, rapid reflexes, enhanced aggression responses, and primitive social structures based on dominance hierarchies. A Christine student raised a shimmering appendage. Instructor Velmoth, are humans actually dangerous to other species? Extremely dangerous, Velmoth replied with obvious satisfaction. Their homeworld produced them through constant warfare and survival challenges. They are essentially mobile weapons disguised as intelligent beings. Katie bit her tongue to keep from responding. She wanted to explain that humans were capable of incredible gentleness and creativity, that they had produced beautiful art and music, that they could love as deeply as they could fight. But she knew that any attempt to defend her species would be seen as threatening behavior. After class, the 4 humans walked back to their isolated section in silence. Other students moved out of their way in the corridors, some making fearful sounds when the humans passed too close. Katie noticed that even the maintenance robots seemed to give them extra space. "This is insane," Amy finally said when they reached the safety of their common room. "They act like we are going to kill them all." "Maybe we should," Jake muttered. "At least then we would have a reason to be treated like criminals." "Do not say things like that," Ben warned. "The whole station is monitored. If they record you making threats, they will send us all home in chains." Katie looked out the reinforced window at the main corridor. She watched the other students moving freely, eating together in the common areas, forming friendships across species lines, everything the humans were denied because of fear and prejudice. The next day brought a new humiliation. Velmoth assigned a special project to the human students while the rest of the class worked on normal coursework. "I want you 4 to prepare a presentation on why Deathworld species should remain quarantined from civilized Galactic society," he announced with a cruel smile. "You will present your findings to the entire academy next week." Katie felt sick to her stomach. He was asking them to argue for their own exclusion, to prove that they did not deserve to be part of the galactic community. It was the cruelest assignment she could imagine. "Sir, is there an alternative project we could work on instead?" she asked politely. "There is not," Velmoth replied, "unless you are refusing to complete your assigned coursework. That would be grounds for immediate expulsion." Over the following days, the harassment got worse. Someone started throwing food at the humans during meal deliveries. Anonymous messages appeared on their room screens calling them violent animals who should go back to their savage homeworld. The environmental systems in their section began malfunctioning, making the air too hot during the day and too cold at night. Katie reported the incidents to Headmaster Zethkari, but he dismissed her complaints. "These are minor adjustments as other species adapt to your presence," he told her. "Perhaps if humans showed more civilized behavior, the other students would be more accepting." "What exactly do you mean by civilized behavior?" Katie asked. "Submission to superior species," Zethkari replied without hesitation. "Recognition of your place in the natural hierarchy." That night, Katie lay awake thinking about the headmaster's words. He wanted humans to act like conquered animals, grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance they might receive. The thought made her angrier than she had ever been in her life, but anger was exactly what they expected from her. Every alien on the station was watching for signs of human violence and aggression. They wanted her to lose control, to prove their theories about Deathworld savages correct. Amy had already started skipping classes, unable to handle the constant humiliation. Jake spent most of his time in the gym, punching exercise equipment until his knuckles bled. Ben buried himself in research, trying to find some regulation or law that would protect them from the abuse. Katie was the only one still trying to maintain normal attendance and behavior, but even she was reaching her breaking point. The combination of isolation, harassment, and academic sabotage was wearing down her resolve. During lunch the next day, a group of ethereal students floated past their section and began making comments about human mating habits. The translators converted their harmonic communications into crude jokes about violence and reproduction. Katie watched through the window as they laughed at their own cruel humor. "How much longer do we have to put up with this?" Jake asked. Katie did not answer because she did not know. Earth Command expected them to complete a full semester, but she was not sure any of them could last that long. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. That evening, she called her mother for the first time since arriving at the academy. "How are things going, sweetheart?" Captain Morgan asked. Katie looked around the small common room at her 3 fellow humans. Amy was staring at nothing. Jake was nursing bruised knuckles, and Ben was writing furiously in his journal. They all looked defeated. "Everything is fine, Mom," Katie lied. "We are learning a lot about galactic culture." She could not bring herself to admit that the mission was failing, that they were being systematically broken down by creatures who saw them as monsters. The movement happened so quickly that most of the alien students missed it entirely. One moment Katie was standing motionless with blood dripping from her broken nose, and the next moment Instructor Velmoth was on the ground screaming in agony. Katie's right hand had shot forward like a striking snake, her fingers wrapping around Velmoth's extended arm just below the elbow joint. Her left hand had simultaneously grabbed his wrist, creating a lever system that any human would recognize as a basic combat technique. Then she had stepped forward and twisted with her entire body weight behind the motion. The sound of snapping bone echoed through the great hall like a gunshot, followed immediately by Velmoth's inhuman shriek of pain. His arm now bent at an impossible angle, the bone clearly broken in at least 2 places. The pale blue alien collapsed to his knees, cradling his ruined limb against his chest. Katie released him and stepped back, wiping blood from her nose with the back of her hand. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and calm, but it carried clearly through the stunned silence of the vast chamber. That is what a threatened human actually looks like. 800 alien students sat in absolute shock, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The human had moved faster than their eyes could follow, with a precision and efficiency that spoke of deadly training. Most terrifying of all, she had clearly held back during the weeks of harassment and abuse, choosing restraint when she could have ended any confrontation in seconds. Security drones swarmed onto the platform within moments, their weapons trained on Katie. But she made no move to resist or continue fighting. She simply stood calmly beside the writhing Velmoth, looking out at the crowd of terrified alien faces. "Do not move, human," the lead security drone commanded through its speakers. "I was not planning to," Katie replied politely. Medical teams rushed onto the stage to treat Velmoth, whose screams had subsided into whimpering moans. The medics worked frantically to stabilize his shattered arm, while casting nervous glances at the human who had caused the damage. Katie noticed that none of them would come within arm's reach of her, even though she showed no signs of aggression. Headmaster Zethkari activated the emergency protocols from his position at the podium. Heavy blast doors began sealing the exits as containment fields sprang to life around the human section of the audience. The Academy's automated systems had classified this as a Deathworld species containment breach. "All students return to your quarters immediately," Zethkari announced, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Human specimen Katie Morgan is to be placed in maximum security detention pending investigation." As the crowd began to disperse, Katie could see the fear in their alien faces. They had spent weeks treating her like a dangerous animal, but now they realized that she truly was dangerous in ways they had never imagined. The restraint she had shown during their harassment was not weakness, but incredible self-control. Jake, Amy, and Ben were escorted back to their sealed section by armed security drones. Katie watched them go, knowing that her actions had probably doomed the entire human exchange program. Earth's first attempt at galactic integration had ended with violence, exactly as the aliens had predicted. But as she was led away to a detention cell, Katie felt something she had not experienced in weeks at the Academy. She felt proud. For the first time since arriving on this station, she had acted like herself instead of trying to be what the aliens wanted her to be. The detention cell was a small metal box with basic life support and a single chair. Katie sat down and waited, knowing that her mother and the Earth Diplomatic Corps would be contacted soon. The political fallout from this incident would be enormous. Hours passed before anyone came to see her. When the door finally opened, she expected to see Headmaster Zethkari or security officials. Instead, a small group of alien students entered her cell, including representatives from several different species. The first to speak was a Christine whose silicon body sparkled with nervous energy. "We wanted to thank you," it said through its harmonic translator. Katie looked at them in confusion. "Thank me for what?" "For showing us what courage looks like," replied an ethereal whose translucent form pulsed with soft colors. "We have been watching the harassment you humans endured, and we did nothing to stop it because we were afraid." A third student, one of the small, furry, six-legged beings Katie had seen on her first day, scurried forward. "Instructor Velmoth has been cruel to many students over the years, not just humans. We were too frightened to report him because he had protection from the administration." Katie realized that she was not the only victim of the Academy's systemic prejudice. Other students had suffered in silence, watching as humans were openly abused while feeling helpless to intervene. "What you did was not wrong," the Christine continued. "You defended yourself against an attacker who broke your nose in front of hundreds of witnesses. Any being has the right to protect themselves from assault." The visit lasted only a few minutes, before security drones returned to escort the alien students away. But their words stayed with Katie as she sat alone in her cell. She had not just struck back against one abusive instructor. She had shown the entire academy that victims did not have to accept their treatment in silence. The next morning, Captain Morgan arrived on an emergency transport from Earth, along with Dr. Sarah Williams, Earth's chief xenopsychologist, and a full diplomatic team. Katie was brought to a formal hearing room where the Academy's entire board of directors had assembled. "This human has committed unprovoked assault against a faculty member." Headmaster Zethkari began the proceedings. "We demand immediate expulsion and criminal prosecution." Dr. Williams stood to address the board. "Before we discuss prosecution, perhaps we should review the security footage of this alleged unprovoked assault." The holographic display showed the entire incident from multiple camera angles. The board watched Velmoth grab Katie, hold her against her will, lecture about her like she was an animal, and then strike her across the face hard enough to break her nose. They saw her stand perfectly still for a full minute while blood ran down her face, showing remarkable restraint before finally responding to defend herself. "This footage shows clear assault by Instructor Velmoth against a student," Dr. Williams pointed out. Katie Morgan's response was proportional self-defense after being physically attacked. "The human used excessive force," one board member protested. "Actually, she used minimal necessary force," Dr. Williams replied calmly. "A human of Katie's training could have killed Velmoth with minimal effort. Instead, she chose a precise technique designed to incapacitate without causing permanent damage. The broken bone will heal completely within weeks." The revelation that a 17-year-old human could have easily killed a full-grown alien faculty member sent visible shockwaves through the board members. They began to understand that every day of harassment the humans had endured, they had been systematically abusing beings capable of extreme violence who chose restraint instead. "Furthermore," Dr. Williams continued, "we have documented evidence of weeks of systematic harassment, discrimination, and psychological abuse directed at all 4 human students. This incident was the inevitable result of your faculty's deliberate provocation." Captain Morgan presented files showing every reported incident, every ignored complaint, every deliberate humiliation the humans had suffered. The pattern was clear and undeniable. The hearing continued for hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The security footage had captured everything, and the Academy's own policies prohibited assault against students regardless of species. Velmoth would face criminal charges, while several administrators would lose their positions for failing to protect students under their care. Katie was released from detention that evening with a formal apology from the Academy Board, but she knew the real changes would take much longer to implement. News of the incident spread across the galaxy within hours. Every major news network carried the story of the human student, who had broken her alien instructor's arm after weeks of systematic abuse. The security footage was broadcast countless times, showing beings across civilized space exactly what had happened in that great hall. The reactions were as varied as the species watching. Some called for immediate quarantine of all Deathworld species, claiming that Katie's response proved humans were too dangerous for galactic society. Others praised her restraint, pointing out that she had endured weeks of harassment before finally defending herself against physical assault. Dr. Sarah Williams found herself at the center of a media storm as she tried to explain human psychology to a galaxy that had never encountered anything like it before. During one particularly heated interview with a panel of alien experts, she made a statement that would be quoted for years afterward. "What you witnessed was not savage aggression," she explained patiently to the host. "A floating ethereal whose form pulsed with agitated colors." Katie Morgan showed remarkable self-control by choosing the minimum force necessary to end a threat. Most humans her age, especially those with military training, would have reacted far more violently to being assaulted. The interviewer's form flashed bright red, indicating extreme skepticism. "You are saying she could have done worse?" "Much worse," Dr. Williams confirmed. "A human trained in combat techniques could have killed Instructor Velmoth in dozens of different ways using only their bare hands. Katie chose a precise technique designed to incapacitate without permanent injury. That choice represents extraordinary restraint, not savage brutality." This revelation sent shockwaves through alien communities who had been demanding Katie's prosecution. The idea that she had actually shown mercy while defending herself was difficult for many species to comprehend. Back at the Academy, the aftermath of the incident was creating changes that no one had expected. The blast doors separating the human section had been permanently opened after the investigation revealed they violated several Academy policies about equal treatment. For the first time since arriving, Katie and her fellow humans could move freely through the station. But the most significant change was in how other students treated them. Instead of fear and avoidance, many alien students now approached them with curiosity and respect. They wanted to understand beings who could choose restraint despite possessing such devastating capabilities. Katie was walking to her first class since the incident when a group of Christine students approached her in the corridor. Their silicon bodies chimed softly as they communicated among themselves before their spokesperson addressed her. "We wanted to apologize," the lead Christine said through its harmonic translator. "We knew what Instructor Velmoth was doing to you and your friends, but we were too afraid to help." "You do not need to apologize," Katie replied. "Fear is a natural response to danger. But you showed us that courage is also natural," another Christine added. "You could have hurt him much sooner, but you chose to endure instead. That choice makes you stronger than any of us realized." Similar conversations happened throughout the day as Katie attended her classes. The same students who had whispered about human savagery now wanted to learn about human culture and history. They asked about Earth's wars and conflicts, but also about human art, music, and literature. Jake, Amy, and Ben were experiencing the same transformation in how they were treated. Amy had started attending classes again and found herself surrounded by students eager to hear about life on mining stations in deep space. Ben's expertise in xenobiology made him popular with students from biological species who wanted to understand their own evolution better. Jake's stories about farming on Earth fascinated aliens from worlds where food was manufactured rather than grown. The four humans were no longer specimens to be studied or feared. They had become individuals with their own stories and perspectives. The most dramatic change came during the next weekly assembly. Katie expected to be excluded as usual, but Headmaster Zethkari personally invited her to speak to the gathered student body. "Many of you have questions about human behavior and culture following recent events," he announced to the crowd. "Miss Morgan has agreed to provide educational context about her species and their homeworld." Standing on the same platform where she had been assaulted just weeks earlier, Katie looked out at 800 alien faces that no longer showed fear or disgust. Instead, she saw curiosity and genuine interest. "Humans come from what you call a death world," she began simply. "Everything on Earth evolved to survive in a dangerous environment, filled with predators, natural disasters, and competition for resources. This shaped us into beings capable of violence when threatened." She paused, gathering her thoughts as she looked at the diverse crowd before her. But the same environment that made us dangerous also made us compassionate. Humans learned that survival depended on cooperation, on protecting the weak, on working together against common threats. We became capable of great love because we understood the cost of losing those we care about. The hall was completely silent as she continued her explanation. When Instructor Velmoth struck me, I had to make a choice. I could have killed him easily, but that would have proven your worst fears about human savagery correct. I could have done nothing and remained a victim, for that would have failed everyone who was watching to see how humans respond to injustice. Katie touched her nose, which had healed completely but still bore a small scar from the break. So I chose the middle path. I used exactly enough force to stop the threat and no more. That choice represents what humans truly are. Beings capable of terrible violence who choose restraint. Creatures from a death world who prefer peace. When she finished speaking, the applause from 800 alien students was thunderous. But more importantly, Katie could see understanding in their faces. They finally grasped what Dr. Williams had been trying to explain. Human restraint was not weakness, but perhaps their greatest strength. The Academy implemented sweeping reforms in the wake of the investigation. New policies protected minority species from harassment and discrimination. Faculty members received mandatory training in cultural sensitivity and appropriate treatment of students from all backgrounds. Most significantly, the Academy's motto was changed from advancing galactic civilization to unity through understanding. Instructor Velmoth was dismissed from his position and faced criminal charges for assault. Several administrators lost their jobs for failing to protect students under their care. The Academy's board issued formal apologies to all 4 human students and offered them full scholarships to complete their education. Katie chose to stay, as did her 3 friends. They had work to finish as Earth's first ambassadors to the galactic community, but now they did that work as equals rather than specimens, as respected students rather than feared outcasts. Months later, as Katie prepared for her final examinations, she received a message from her mother back on Earth. "The entire planet is proud of what you accomplished," Captain Morgan wrote. "You showed the galaxy who we really are, not through words, but through actions. Because of your courage, dozens of other human students have been accepted to academies across civilized space." Katie smiled as she read the message. Her broken nose had healed completely, leaving only a small scar as a reminder of that day in the Great Hall. But the lessons learned would last for generations. She had kept her promise from that first night on the station. She had proven that humans deserved their place in the galactic community. More importantly, she had shown that strength was not measured by capacity for violence, but by the wisdom to choose when violence was necessary and when mercy was stronger. The human exchange program was declared a complete success, and Katie Morgan became the first human to receive the Academy's highest honor for courage and leadership. The award ceremony was held in the same great hall where she had once been treated like a laboratory specimen. As she accepted the medal, Katie looked out at the crowd of alien faces that now showed respect and admiration instead of fear. She had changed their understanding of what it meant to be human, but they had changed her understanding of what it meant to be strong. The galaxy was finally ready to welcome Earth's children as equals,